Mawethu is about to lose everything she has fought for, and the one person who could save her might be the same person plotting against her. If you have been following this family for even 1 week, you already know that nothing in this house stays hidden for long, and tonight's episode proves that all over again. Stick around, because before this video ends you are going to understand exactly why Wandle's name is now on everyone's lips, why Portia is suddenly acting like she cares about Mawethu, and why one father in this story is about to lose control of his own home. Let's start where the episode starts, inside the Zondo family business, because that is really where all of this drama is rooted. For weeks now we have watched Wandle carry himself like the golden child, the loyal son who would do anything to protect his father's company. Tonight we finally see the mask slip. It becomes painfully clear that Wandle has been feeding information to Kusila Lazarus, a man who has made it his mission to weaken the Zondo family from the inside. This is not a small slip of the tongue or an innocent mistake either. This is a calculated betrayal, and the tragedy of it is that nobody in that house suspected their own blood could be the leak. Mama Zondo is the first to sense that something is wrong. She has always had that instinct, the kind of quiet observation that comes from years of watching her family closely, and this episode she starts putting pieces together that do not add up. She is not ready to say it out loud yet, but you can see it in the way she watches Wandle across the room, the way her smile does not quite reach her eyes anymore. Meanwhile, on the other side of this whole mess, we have Portia, and her storyline this episode is honestly one of the most interesting threads in the entire show right now. Portia wants the Chief Information Officer position, and she wants it badly. She has been positioning herself for months, being seen in the right meetings, saying the right things to the right people, and now she finds herself sitting on information that could either make her career or destroy it completely. She knows about Wandle. She knows what he has been doing, and she understands that this knowledge is powerful, maybe powerful enough to finally push her into the CIO seat. But here is the complication that makes this so juicy to watch unfold. Portia cannot simply walk up to Mawethu and tell her everything, because doing that would expose her own position and the fact that she has been sitting on this secret instead of reporting it immediately. She is caught between protecting her own ambitions and doing what is right, and tonight we see just how uncomfortable that tension makes her. There is also a quieter, more personal side to this. Portia and Mawethu have history, the kind of bond that makes betrayal even more complicated because it is layered with actual affection. Mawethu has never done anything to hurt Portia, and that fact weighs on her in this episode more than she wants to admit. When Portia is finally confronted, or at least pressed into a corner where she has to make a decision, we see her hesitate in a way that tells us this woman is not purely selfish. She is torn, and that internal conflict is what makes this storyline so compelling right now, because we genuinely do not know which way she is going to fall. Lazarus, for his part, is playing this entire situation like a chess master. He understands that Wandle is desperate and that desperate people make useful pawns. There is a moment in this episode where Lazarus essentially reminds Wandle of his place, telling him plainly that he is an employee just like everyone else and that information will only be shared with the rest of the staff when Lazarus decides it is time. It is a cold, almost dismissive line, and it tells us everything about how Lazarus actually views Wandle. To him, Wandle is not a partner in this scheme. He is a tool, something to be used and discarded once he has served his purpose. Wandle does not seem to fully grasp this yet, and that blindness is going to cost him eventually. What makes Wandle's story genuinely tragic rather than simply villainous is that his motivations are not built purely out of greed. There is a wounded quality to him, a sense that he feels overlooked or undervalued within his own family, and that wound has been exploited by Lazarus with surgical precision. When Mawethu eventually senses that something has shifted in Wandle, when she notices the sadness behind his eyes and starts to suspect the truth, it hits differently because we know she still cares about him despite everything. Family loyalty in this show has never been simple, and this episode leans hard into that complexity. Now let's shift over to the completely different but equally emotional storyline involving Zolani and Mawethu, because their journey continues to be one of the emotional anchors of this show. These two have announced that they are officially together, that they are expecting a child, and that they intend to build a life and raise their family regardless of who approves. It is a bold, defiant declaration, and predictably, it does not sit well with everyone. Ulathi, Zolani's father, has never made a secret of his controlling nature. He is a man who believes that his word is law inside his own household, and this episode we watch that belief collide head-on with his son's determination to live his own life. There is a particularly telling scene where Ulathi flatly refuses to let a graduation celebration go ahead the way the family had hoped, declaring that as long as he is the man of the house, what he says goes, and nobody will attend that celebration under his roof. It is a small moment on the surface, just a disagreement over a party, but it represents something much larger. It shows us a father who is terrified of losing his grip on a family that is slowly growing beyond his control, and that fear is starting to poison every relationship around him. Lemis, Ulathi's wife, does not make things easier either. Rather than acting as a peacemaker, she actually pushes her husband further, encouraging him to prove that he is, in her words, a real man by confronting his own son and demanding that Zolani end things with Mawethu entirely. It is uncomfortable to watch Ulathi carry out this instruction, because you can see in his body language and his hesitant tone that even he is not fully convinced this is the right move. When he sits down with Zolani to deliver this ultimatum, there is a visible discomfort on both sides. Zolani listens, but you can tell he is holding back his true feelings, and it raises a fair question that a lot of viewers have probably already been asking. Whose idea was this really, Ulathi's or his wife's? Because at this point, it feels pretty clear that Ulathi is not entirely capable of making decisions on his own without Lemis' influence steering him. This dynamic sets up an inevitable clash, because Zolani has made his position known. He wants to be with Mawethu. He wants to raise this child together, and he is not interested in backing down simply because his father disapproves. Whether he has the courage to stand firm against Ulathi's demands, or whether the pressure from his parents eventually wears him down, is going to be one of the central questions driving the next few episodes. Meanwhile, there is a whole other layer of tension building around a graduation celebration for Themeka, and this becomes a flashpoint for old wounds resurfacing. Thandika, who has clearly been trying to mend fences and show that she has grown from past mistakes, wants to make this celebration meaningful. She wants photographs, she wants the extended family present, she wants this day to represent healing after everything the family has been through together. But Ulathi's refusal to allow certain people to attend threatens to turn what should be a joyful milestone into another battlefield for control and old grudges. It is heartbreaking in a way, because Themeka's graduation should be about her achievement, yet it keeps getting swallowed up by the adults around her and their unresolved conflicts. There is real concern brewing about how Thandika is going to react to all of this, especially given the assumption some family members are making that she will automatically become a difficult or resentful stepmother figure in this new blended family dynamic. It is an assumption that feels unfair on the surface, but the show seems to be setting up a slow burn where we watch whether Thandika rises above those expectations or whether the pressure eventually pushes her into exactly the role everyone fears she will play. Back to the corporate side of things, because that story is not finished unraveling yet. Zolika is clearly uneasy about the idea of Wandel returning to work at all, and honestly, who could blame her? She understands, perhaps better than anyone else in the family right now, what it actually costs for Wandel to sell out the very company his father built. There is something almost poetic about how Lazarus seems to be enjoying every second of this situation. He now effectively controls a piece of the Zondo legacy without having done any of the honest work to earn it, and he knows it. Watching him savor that control, knowing he holds real power over the family simply because Wandel handed it to him, adds a layer of dread to every scene he appears in. We also get a glimpse of how this betrayal is going to affect Wandal's personal relationships going forward, because it seems increasingly likely that his signing off on this deal with Lazarus is not something that can simply be undone. Once you cross that line and put things in writing, there is no quiet way back from it, and Wandal is going to have to live with the consequences of that choice, whether that means losing his standing in the family, losing the people who trusted him, or both at once. There is also a subplot bubbling under the surface involving Zolika's own feelings, because she is quite clearly holding on to Wandal despite everything she now knows about him. It puts her in a painful position, loving someone whose actions could destroy her own career and reputation if she is seen as connected to what he has done. When someone close to her essentially tells her that she either needs to find a way to make peace with Wandal's choices or walk away entirely, we see just how limited her options actually feel from where she is standing. She does not seem ready to leave, but she also cannot fully pretend that none of this happened, and that unresolved tension is clearly going to follow her into future episodes. Stepping back and looking at the bigger picture of this episode, what strikes me most is how every single storyline circles back to the same central theme, which is the cost of loyalty and how easily it can be manipulated or tested. Wandal's loyalty to his family was tested by ambition and resentment, and he failed that test. Portia's loyalty to Mawethu is being tested by her own career ambitions, and we still do not know how she is going to resolve that. Zolani's loyalty to his own happiness is being tested by his father's need for control. Even Thandika's loyalty to her own growth and healing is being tested by a family that keeps expecting the worst from her. It is genuinely impressive writing when a show manages to weave that many threads through one common emotional thread without it feeling forced, and this episode does exactly that. Now let's talk about where all of this is likely heading, because there are some pretty clear signals scattered throughout tonight's episode. Portia is sitting on a secret that is far too explosive to hold on to forever. Either she uses it to secure her CIO position and risks exposing her own complicity in staying silent this long, or she comes clean to Mawethu and risks losing whatever leverage she thought she had. Given how much the show has invested in humanizing Portia rather than painting her as a simple villain, my instinct says we are heading toward a confrontation scene where Portia finally chooses honesty over ambition, even if it costs her dearly. That kind of redemption arc tends to be where these stories go, especially once a character has been shown hesitating the way Portia has. As for Wandal, I do not think Lazarus is going to protect him for much longer. Men like Lazarus do not build alliances out of loyalty. They build them out of usefulness, and the moment Wandal stops being useful, or the moment keeping him around becomes a liability, Lazarus is going to cut him loose without a second thought. When that happens, Wandal is going to be left completely exposed, with no protection from the very man he betrayed his family for, and that is going to be a brutal reckoning to watch unfold. On the family front, I genuinely believe Ulothi's controlling behavior is building toward a breaking point. You cannot keep dictating every decision in a household where the younger generation is growing more confident and more willing to push back. Zolani standing up for his relationship with Mawethu feels like the beginning of a larger shift, one where Ulothi is eventually going to be forced to choose between maintaining absolute control and actually keeping his family close to him. Those two goals cannot coexist forever, and something in that dynamic has to give. I also want to point out how well this episode balances the heavier dramatic beats with quieter, more human moments. The scene involving Tamika's graduation, even with all its complications, reminds us that underneath all the scheming and betrayal, this is still a story about a family that genuinely wants to celebrate each other, even when they do not always know how. That contrast between the ugliness of corporate betrayal and the tenderness of a family trying, however clumsily, to show up for each other is really what keeps me coming back to this show week after week. Before I wrap up, I want to be clear that everything discussed here reflects what unfolded within this episode's storyline, and any predictions I have shared are simply my own interpretation of where these character arcs seem to be heading based on the patterns this show has established. Nothing here should be taken as confirmed information about future episodes, since only the writers know exactly where the story is going next. So here is where I land on tonight's central question. Can Portia help Mawethu? I think she can, but only if she is willing to risk everything she has been building for herself. The real question is not whether Portia has the ability to help. It is whether she has the courage to choose Mawethu over her own ambition when the moment finally forces her hand. Based on everything we saw tonight, I believe that moment is coming very soon. That is my full breakdown of tonight's episode. If you agree with where I think this story is heading, or if you have a completely different theory about what Portia is going to do next, drop your thoughts in the comments below. I always read through them, and honestly some of the best theories I have seen for this show have come directly from this community. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure you are subscribed so you do not miss the next one, because with everything set up tonight, the next episode is going to be an emotional one. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next review.